Hi guys, it's me, Arden Lee. I am back with another video, and the message that I want to convey in this video is that you are not responsible for people's feelings towards you. I'm going to go ahead and say that one again. You are not responsible for people's feelings towards you. I had a really wonderful call today with a lovely client of mine, and as she is stepping more and more into her self-worth, into her power, into her attractiveness, into her confidence, she's noticing that she's getting more and more attention, especially of the romantic, flirtatious, or sexual kind. And she described to me that she was noticing how much those situations called up in her a sense of threat or danger, feelings of lack of safety, because she's having a hard time drawing those boundaries, or as she actually put it, knowing where to draw those boundaries. As in, well, is this just friendly conversation, or is this flirting? If I keep going, is something going to be expected of me at some point? And that's really the question to start looking at, right? That is really, that sense of expectation is something that a lot of women in particular, and this can happen to people of any gender, but in particular the way that women have been over time socially conditioned to appeal to men's egos, to caretake those around them, and to be particularly responsible for other people's feelings, can sometimes make this a gender-weighted issue in some ways. We can't escape our social conditioning, sadly. And well, we can. we can, but we have to do that with consciousness. If we just allow ourselves to keep running on our sort of unconscious background programs, then of course this is going to come up, right? Of course, we as women, growing up in a world that really only saw, say the Me Too movement 2 years ago, we are now evolving in society toward a society where we are no longer enabling men's bad behavior, right? We can see that in the media, we can see that in the stories we're telling, we can see that in many ways in our own behavior. However, I want to remind you guys, I feel like sometimes we talk about these issues and we forget that just because our society has evolved forward to a certain point today doesn't mean that all of our programming has necessarily caught up with it. And it's wonderful to witness these purges and this evolution that happens, in society as all these issues got brought up and talked about, because it gives us an opportunity to really examine it and transmute it within ourselves. But I think we have to remember sometimes, you guys, that we grew up in a time that society was very different in. And we experienced our first imprints, our the ways of being that we learned when we were the most neurologically plastic, right? When our brains were still developing, when we were young and we were, thrust into this world, and we're starting to look around ourselves, when we're 2, 3, 4, and being like, what is the way that the world works? How do I learn how to be a human in this environment that I was born into? We have to remember that so many of our unconscious programs are left over from those times that were decades ago, that are not anywhere near where our society is today, which is why it's so often difficult to buck this kind of a tide, right? Or at the very least, it takes conscious awareness. It takes us making a decision and saying, I'm going to do things differently now. I have the support of my present day current society to do this. I have friends and people in my life who also embody the value of, I'm not going to enable poor behavior in men just so I don't hurt their feelings, the way that maybe say my mom did, or the women did in my family that when I was growing up, the way that I learned to do things then, right? So I just want to give us a moment to acknowledge, and this is true, no matter what imprint you're trying to release. I just want to give us a moment of acknowledging that just because our society is evolving forward today doesn't mean that that all of our imprints are naturally just going to upgrade automatically without our taking that opportunity to make a decision about changing the way that we respond to certain situations. That's why things like the Me Too movement and any sort of social justice movement that comes up that gives us an opportunity to look at the ways that we've been doing things unconsciously this whole time and to make a new choice, that's why they're so important, and that is why there is so much gravity and motion and movement behind them. One of many reasons, naturally. So, when you've grown up with the sort of people-pleasing belief that, as many women have, that that it's your responsibility on some level to caretake the feelings of the men around you. And also that if you cause men to have feelings for you, that it's somehow your fault or your responsibility, even though you were just existing. I'll give you an example, even as I was growing up, I remember, being in like high school and hearing about, blue balls, right? The myth of blue balls, right? This idea that just by my being a woman who is somehow capable of turning a guy on, that I was then responsible for his not being in pain because I had somehow caused that, right? Which is ridiculous when you think about it, right? So much responsibility that I was taking for other people's reactions toward my just existing. And when we unpack this and we look at it in this light, it starts to look as ridiculous as it is. But we do this, you guys. We absolutely do this, especially if as a woman we have learned or experienced or somehow been taught to believe that not only are we responsible for men's feelings and for making sure that they don't get their feelings hurt by feeling rejected or feeling like we're not accommodating them or whatever, but if we don't do that, we might also even be in danger, right? How many relationships do we grow up around in our households where, maybe if our mom didn't, I don't know, like make dinner on time or wear the nice dress or whatever, then daddy would get angry, right? This is very, very common. Of course, it can happen with the genders reversed as well. There are plenty of, narcissistic, quote unquote, women, who also make unreasonable demands of the men around them. And I've certainly seen men grow up with relationship models where they were taught that, oh gosh, if my female partner, doesn't get what she wants, then all hell is going to break loose. So I need to just, I need to just maintain whatever she needs, at any time. And that means editing down more of myself and suppressing my needs in order to help another person, right? So this can really happen in many situations. I want to emphasize that because even though I'm speaking specifically about the social conditioning that happens toward women, it can absolutely happen toward men as well. So what happens? So we grow up, and all of a sudden one day we find ourselves at a bar, and we're having a lovely conversation with a guy, and we're having fun, and we're finding our bodies like lit up, right? Like we're in flow with the conversation. We're embodied. We're vibing. We're enjoying this, and then all of a sudden this thing slips in and says, "Wait a minute. At what point in this journey of connection am I going to be obligated to take care of this man's feelings for me? If I act engaged in conversation, is he going to think that I owe him something? If I allow sort of flirty touches just on the hand or arm, is he going to take that as a sign? Is, if we end up kissing here at the bar, am I going to be obligated to go home with him? Now, when I say this out loud, you guys, I'm pretty sure it sounds ridiculous, right? Just because we share a kiss with someone doesn't obligate us to sex. But these beliefs are entrenched on an unconscious level. So saying them out loud and hearing how ridiculous they are actually brings that conscious awareness to some of the thoughts and processes that we're actually having during those times. So we're allowed to release ourselves from that, you guys. This is something that I've experienced very potently. There are so many opportunities I lost in the past for connection with men. Platonic connection, friendship connection, or who knows, maybe like light, flirtatious, romantic connection, all because I was afraid that engaging in that kind of connection was going to obligate me to more. And that, for me, as someone who grew up having the experience and belief instilled in me that attempting to draw boundaries was not only futile and pointless because it wasn't going to work, but it was also potentially dangerous and humiliating. So having that feeling of saying, oh, I'm not allowed to draw boundaries, that's scary for me, that bad things happen when I try to assert my boundaries. People double back on me and say, no, you can't have your boundaries. And not only can you not have your boundaries, but now things are going to be even worse because you tried. When you're going around with that unconscious belief, then that feeling that you can't stop that train that you get on. You're like on a train with a dude, and at some point that train is leaving the station, and you're just, well, oops, guess I'm having sex tonight, right? I was going to say hopefully it's not that bad, but you know what? Sometimes it is that bad. Sometimes it absolutely is that bad. And I hope that men are watching this video too, because like, you guys, I just want to say there are a lot of you guys out there who really don't take no for an answer. Who resort to like whining or cajoling or being like, but why? But you said this, or but you that, or but blah, 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 and making all of this, creating this story in your head, when really a woman is in front of you, really very trying to very kindly and softly tell you no, and you're not hearing it. So I made a decision that if I'm just being myself, and if I'm just shining my joy and my excitement for life all over the world, and if I happen to be attractive, and if I happen to be dressed in a certain way that I'm pleased with, that is comfortable for me, and if anyone takes what I'm doing and makes it about them in some way, then that's their problem. And I've started also, rather than asking that question, okay, at what point are there going to be expectations? This is an important paradigm shift, you guys. Taking that question, well, at what point is it still safe for me? At what point am I going to be expected to do more? Please get rid of that question. That question is toxic in and of itself because it assumes that receiving any kind of attention or affection or connection is transactional. And we want to get rid of that. We want to get rid of that transactional vibe in the first place, because if you're always expecting that you have to do something in return whenever you receive something, it's going to block you from receiving. This is a classic way that we really block ourselves from receiving, you guys. So we don't want that, right? We don't want blocks to our receiving. So instead of saying, at what point am I going to be held under expectations that I don't want, I want you to instead say, at what point is my body still a yes, and when do I turn to a no? Am I a yes to this conversation? Yes. Am I a yes to flirty hand and arm touches? Yes. Am I a yes to cuddling on the sofa and holding hands? Yes. Am I a yes to making out? Maybe. Right? Am I a yes to more than that? Am I a yes to sex? Do I feel in my body that this is something I want to do? And I want us to all give ourselves permission to really feel into where our yes stops. And if you only want to get so far as conversation, connecting, flirting, hand-holding, and if that person wants more from you, that's really their responsibility to own. There is nothing about holding someone's hand or having a connected conversation that obligates you to more that you don't want to do. And I really want to encourage everyone to lean into this. Women especially because of our social conditioning, but men too, because what we really need to do is we really need to really need to stop enabling people in their entitlement to things that we are a no to. We really need to stop subconsciously, tacitly endorsing this idea that anything other than an explicit agreement, our word, the integrity of our word, anything other than the integrity of our word obligates us to anything. Outfits aren't consent, right? Nothing is consent except for consent. You being fabulous is not consent. How many people, how many in particular sexual assault survivors have I witnessed who after being assaulted will say on some unconscious level, my attractiveness did this. My attractiveness is to blame for this outcome, and therefore I don't want to be attractive anymore. It sucks how much of ourselves we edit out just out of our free expression because we're afraid that our free expression obligates us to accommodate other people's feelings towards us. And if people have feelings toward me, you know what? It's going to happen. And that's fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with someone exploring their own feelings for me, of attraction toward me or repulsion toward me. I don't even care. But it's not my responsibility to deal with them. It's my responsibility to show up in my integrity and to connect authentically and to honor where my body is a yes and to also honor where my body is a no and to choose people who would want me to honor where my body is a yes and where my body is a no. Why do I want someone in my life at all? If they want me to do something even when my body is a no to it. Why are there even people out there? I mean, of course they exist. Of course we wouldn't be talking about this problem if it wasn't real. But I know I've made videos about this before, but why do y'all want someone to do something that they don't want to do? What are you getting out of that? How much time are you wasting pursuing someone who is a no when you could be opening yourself up to connecting with someone who might be a yes? Just by saving yourself that time. So in conclusion, you are not responsible for people's feelings towards you. You are responsible for your actions. You are responsible for your impact. But please don't mistake your impact for someone else's just reacting to your existence. That's a fine line, you guys. That's a tough one to parse out in a video, right? That's one that you may have to really tune into your discernment and also get some second opinions from people you trust, right? Hey, was there anywhere where I was out of my integrity here? Was there anywhere where, where I could have done better, right? That's always a smart question to ask to the people you trust around you, who you trust to really have your best interest at heart. But at the end of the day, if you are going out and you are just existing and people have feelings toward you just for you living your life and being who you are, whatever those feelings are, it's their responsibility. And you are not under any obligation to accommodate someone. I invite you to feel first and foremost obligated to honoring the needs of your own body. I invite you to give your first loyalty to your body. And if people like you, I want to remind people too, the people who often have this fear, are often the most accommodating people to others, right? I am afraid that I will be obligated to fulfill people's feelings for me in some way if I lead them on. And meanwhile, they will also get into relationships where they please and please and please and please other people who take from them without giving back, without giving reciprocity. So every woman out there who's ever said like, oh man, well I started making out with him, I guess I'm obligated to sex now. I want to invite you to really look at your relationships and how much you in your past perhaps gave the men in your life and didn't receive anything in return from. How many times did you give and give and give? And did they feel comfortable just taking? Again, we can swap genders for this, right? It doesn't matter. It's, yeah, there are trends in our social conditioning, but it can really show up anywhere. So stop feeling obligated. Stop blocking yourself from receiving. Be honest, be in your yes and your no. Learn to really listen to your body and be honest about where your yes and your no is, and pull the people who are going to occupy important roles in your life to being in agreement with honoring your body's integrity as well. Right? You don't want to be with anyone who wants to bulldoze past your no. So get rid of those people. Get rid of the belief that you owe people anything just because they have feelings toward you. Thank you guys. Hope this was helpful. I'll see you next time.